Across the country, there's been no relief as food costs keep rising. A recent Associated Press poll shows more than half of Americans consider grocery costs to be a major source of stress.
CBS News correspondent Jolene Kent hit the aisles to find out what's driving up prices and how you can save.
A trip to the grocery store is stinging a little more at the checkout.
$16.99 for one pack of pecans. It's insane.
Yeah, it's bad. I can't believe how much some of this stuff costs, actually.
Overall, grocery prices have continued their upward march, rising nearly 3% compared to last year. Food prices went up by 0.5% from July to August. That's the fastest monthly increase since fall of 2022. It was driven in part by commonly imported groceries.
Tariffs have a huge impact on grocery prices.
Food industry analyst Phil Lempert is known as the supermarket guru. Why are we seeing these increases?
Number one is climate change. We can't grow our food where we used to grow it. Now it's had to move to Central and Latin America. Number two is a labor shortage. And then third is our tariffs.
Among the biggest price jumps, coffee up more than 20% compared to a year ago.
We got 50% tariffs on coffee from Brazil, and we import about 35% of our coffee beans unroasted from Brazil. Coffee is going to get more expensive.
This is not a political talking point. This is actually about to happen for millions of Americans across the country. They're going to get a letter in the mail from their health insurance plan stating that their monthly premiums are going to go up by hundreds of dollars per month per person. And it'll be because Republicans, having just voted to kick 10 million people off of health care 2 months ago, are allowing the Affordable Care Act subsidies that made premiums cheaper to expire. American families all across the country will have an impossible choice to make. They don't have an extra couple $100. They really don't have that money. Tens of millions of Americans are going to be forced back into the period before the Affordable Care Act, where they'd look at their health care premiums and say, I just can't do it. I can't make my rent or my mortgage, pay my utilities, pay my grocery bills, pay for gas, pay for kids' tuition, pay for my parents, and pay for health care. A lot of you remember that time. And what's going to happen this fall is not a political challenge for Republicans. It is a real challenge for people across the country. Democrats are ready to work with anyone to restore health care for the millions of Americans who are about to get smacked in the face. But that starts with a meeting. It has to start with a meeting. And Leader Thune and Speaker Johnson haven't even asked Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries to sit down and discuss this. It starts with a conversation about how to avoid all this pain for millions of Americans across the country.
So let me see if I understand this correctly. In a country where people already can't afford the medications that they need, including things like insulin for diabetics, without which they die, our fearless leader is going to double down on that and impose 100% tariffs on imported medications. In the only country in the developed world that does not have some form of universal health care, where people can't even afford to go to the doctor, I know because I'm one of them, you're going to essentially double the cost of imported medications to this country. I'm going to explain this one more time. The exporter does not pay the tariff. A tariff is a tax on imported goods. The company that imports the product pays the tariff. And in this capitalist hellscape that we live in, do you really think that the corporation that imports the medication is going to eat that cost. No, they're going to pass it on to the consumer because they don't care, because they have contracts with the insurance companies. And so the people that are lucky enough to have insurance get to have the drugs, but with a copay. I'm so tired. We're all just so exhausted at this point.
You talk to America's farmers, they'll tell you these are tough times. A combination of high operating costs, low commodity prices, and lost markets has had devastating repercussions on the agriculture industry and the communities built around it. CBS's Lana Zak is in Davenport, Iowa tonight with new details on the growing crisis.
Farmers say this has been a perfect storm. They were already battling higher growing costs and crop disease, and now China, which had previously purchased half of all U.S. exports, has pulled out.
U.S. soybean farmers are starting their harvest, but they face steep losses that could fuel farm bankruptcies and foreclosures nationwide.
This is awful discouraging. You know, we do our very best to grow a good crop to feed the world, and then we can't hardly give it away.
Many growers say they feel betrayed. Last week, the Trump administration gave Argentina a financial lifeline, a $20 billion loan. But Argentina then cut the price of its own soy exports to China, undercutting U.S. farmers.
We don't do something. We're not going to help no family farms.
In Arkansas this month, hundreds of farmers packed into a church to plead for help from the government.
I'm in the worst shape right now that I've ever been in.
With prices for crops crashing, farmers are doing everything they can to stay viable, even selling off equipment. Joel's Tractors in Strawberry Point, Iowa saw a 30% jump in farm machinery up for auction this year.
Put a finger full of grease in there.
Keeping aging tractors running has Lawrence Christensen and his team working at full throttle.
The demand is stronger than the availability.
New equipment costs have increased by 60% in the last 8 years. John Deere, a U.S. manufacturing icon, says U.S. tariffs on steel and aluminum will cost them $600 million this year. Over the past 2 years, the company has had to lay off 2,500 employees.
Majority of my family works here.
Gabriel Gomez was a proud Deere employee, following in the footsteps of his dad and uncles. Friday was his last day.
It's like a kick to the gut, right? When you're getting laid off after you've given 20 plus years to the company.
When you think about these tariffs and the ripple effects that they've had, do you think it's worth it?
You know, you hope that possibly in the long term they would be helpful. Currently here in the short term, it's really killing us. We were sold that we were going to do everything we could for the American workers, and we're seeing quite the opposite at this time.
President Trump says he will make it up to farmers, promising them some of the tariff revenue. But here in this area where John Deere is headquartered, the economic losses are hitting the entire community.
Catherine, thank you. Breaking news from overnight. The federal government is now shut down. Congress failed to pass a funding measure to keep government programs and services running by the midnight deadline. Now, here is a live look over Capitol Hill this morning. After back and forth in Congress, Democrats refused to extend current funding without major changes for health care. The last shutdown happened under President Trump's first term in 2018 and lasted 35 days. Now, roughly 750,000 federal workers are expected to be furloughed, while others will stay on the job without pay. Emma Wolfhorst is in D.C. to explain what this shutdown means for you.
After Democrats and Republicans once again failed to reach a deal on a spending plan Tuesday night, the government went into a partial shutdown.
We are not going to be held hostage for over $1 trillion in new spending on a continuing resolution, nor are we going to be held hostage to allow illegals to get free health care in a continuing resolution.
If there was ever a moment for Donald Trump and Republicans to get serious about health care, it's now.
We've been here before, but not for nearly 7 years. So what will remain open and who still has to go to work? Any employees deemed essential who work to, quote, protect life and property, end quote. Think air traffic controllers, TSA agents, national security officers like the FBI, CIA, Homeland Security, as well as the military. However, those people won't get paid. Social Security payments will continue to go out, and Veterans Affairs medical centers remain open, with VA benefits still processed and delivered. The U.S. Postal Service is also unaffected by a shutdown. Non-essential federal workers are furloughed, and the Trump administration has also threatened permanent layoffs of those workers. Individual administrations get some leeway to decide what services to freeze and what to maintain, and each federal agency develops its own plan. Tuesday evening, the Office of Management and Budget ordered all federal agencies to execute their shutdown plans while placing the blame squarely on Democrats' shoulders. So will those furloughed federal workers and military service members get paid? Eventually, yes. During the last shutdown in 2019, Congress passed a bill requiring furloughed employees receive retroactive pay once a shutdown ends. Lawmakers on the Hill say they hope the shutdown will be short.
They're getting warnings now. It would be $1 billion impact every week that the government is shut down. That's according to Tourism Economics. $1 billion in losses because of disruptions in air travel or train trips, because national parks and museums would likely close. We certainly have seen that happen in past shutdowns. U.S. Travel, which is the trade group representing the industry, sent a letter to congressional leaders calling a shutdown a wholly preventable blow to America's travel economy. Quote, the longer a shutdown drags on, the more likely we are to see longer TSA lines, flight delays and cancellations, national parks in disrepair, and unnecessary delays in modernizing travel infrastructure. There's a lot of those projects going on. This was according to CEO Jeff Freeman in a news release. They're pointing to an Ipsos survey that showed 60% of Americans say they would cancel or avoid trips by air in the event of a shutdown. But look, the travel industry has already seen softer demand in the second quarter through summer's end. International travel is noticeably off, especially from Canada. Hotel executives publicly have grappled with shrinking government business because jobs were slashed earlier this year. There were fewer government people traveling, staying at hotels. If you have whole departments shuttered and federal workers furloughed, that most certainly would hit the travel industry, not just hotels, but restaurants that cater then to government workers who go to conferences and things like that. So it has a ripple effect beyond just TSA lines, so to speak.
Right. Hey, everybody. We have a 5-alarm fire at the Department of Justice. I don't like to be alarmist, but this is a crisis and you need to know what's going on. I'm Liz Oyer, the former pardon attorney for the Department of Justice. The Justice Department is the largest law enforcement agency in our country. It has enormous power to investigate, prosecute, and jail people. If those powers are misused, it puts us in danger and it can ruin lives. Over the last few months, I've been telling you about the dominoes that are falling inside the Department of Justice. First, it was Trump's appointment of his personal attorneys to run the place, like it's his personal law firm. Then it was the mass firings of career experts who stood in the way of the president's political agenda. Then all the guardrails were removed, oversight of ethics, professional responsibility, transparency. Then came the illegal appointments of unqualified U.S. attorneys to prosecute the president's enemies and protect his friends. Then Trump let it be known that the department is open for business, and the money started pouring in. Cases were dismissed against those who paid well-connected lawyers like Pam Bondi's brother. Pardons were doled out to donors and supporters. Now, all of this is coming to a head. On Friday, Trump forced out the chief prosecutor in Virginia because he couldn't find evidence to indict 3 of Trump's enemies, Adam Schiff, Letitia James, and James Comey. Then Donald Trump demanded that Pam Bondi prosecute them anyway. He said they're guilty as hell and she better make it happen. It is a cardinal rule of our justice system that prosecutors have to follow the facts and the law. But the president is now explicitly instructing them not to do that. The question for all Americans now is, where does this end? Is Donald Trump going to start ordering prosecutions of all those who criticize him? All those who didn't vote for him? Is he going to start jailing his enemies en masse? We also need to remember that the Department of Justice is responsible for keeping us safe. But Trump has filled the place with people who have no idea how to do that. And he is prioritizing political vendettas ahead of public safety and national security. We all need to speak up and push back against this loudly and urgently before it's too late.
Does anybody else actually lose sleep over the way the country is? I'm so worried. I haven't slept good in months. I've been hoping and praying things will change, but it doesn't seem like they are. It's very sad and scary to me.